Dr. Satan! The World's Weirdest Criminal, written by Paul Ernst. Narrated by Edward E. French. Episode 5, The Two Titans. Slowly, Keen's eyesight returned to him to telegraph to his mind weird nightmare pictures. Black-draped walls closed him in. Lounging against one wall were two men, a man with a giant's torso and no legs, and a creature with a hairy ape-like face in which were set bright, cruel little eyes. Across from them was a metal brazier set on a high tripod in which a small flame flickered. In the center of the room was a metal table, bare save for a small pinch of yellowish powder, and over this table was bending the man who had spoken. A figure that set the blood to leaping in Keen's veins as his heart thudded with sudden acceleration in his breast. A tall figure, robed in red, with a red mask over his face, red gloves on his hands, and a red skull cap from which protruded small mocking imitations of Satan's horns. Dr. Satan turned from the metal table. His black eyes burned at Keen through the eye holes of the red mask. The mask quivered a little as the lips behind it moved. "Welcome, Ascott Keane," came the sardonic words. "We are honored that you should have gone to such trouble to visit us in our modest lair." Keen's face, looking in the red glare that illuminated the room like something cast in bronze, remained impassive. Wordlessly, he watched the diabolical figure in red. The mockery faded from Dr. Satan's voice. His harsh tone was edged with steel as he said, "You committed suicide when you resolved a month ago to devote your life to destroying me." "Oh, yes. I knew the resolve the instant it was made. I have ways of knowing what is in men's minds, though I concede that you were able shortly after that to shield your brain from me. Tell me, Ascott Keane, what warned you of my existence?" Keane stood straight and tall before the red-robed figure. His resemblance to Walstead faded, in spite of makeup, with the altering of his expression. He was Keane again, regardless of collodion-painted lips and padded clothes. "A month ago, I talked with the son of a bankrupt friend of mine." The boy, a wild and not very strong character, said nothing significant. "But I, too, can read a little of what is in men's minds." And in his I caught a glimpse of a figure in Satan's red masquerade. I got a hint of the man's background and motives. A rich man, still young, jaded with purchased thrills, with no more humanity in his heart than a snake, out to become the world's leading criminal. A man whose whimsical choice of a name, Dr. Satan, could not have been more apt in expressing the ruthlessness of his purpose. A sleek beast, playing a monstrous game. A thing to be stamped out as soon as possible. The black eyes gleamed through the satanic mask. "Young Monroe, you are talking about. Fortunately, he did not know my identity at that time. And now, no one will ever know. Monroe is no longer in a position to talk. And some papers he left behind with his lawyer have been destroyed within the hour." Again, the arrogant voice hardened. "So you have decided to be the one to annihilate me. Noble, Keane. But the roles will be reversed. It is you who will be annihilated. I marked you at the start as a man to be killed. Wealthy yourself, with a fairly analytical mind, you have entertained yourself for years by scotching crime. But your career ends with me, Keane. It ends now, in this room." Gers and Bostiff slowly left the wall they had been lounging against. Gers came with quick, small steps to Keen's left side. Bostiff hitched his great body with swinging movements of his huge arms to Keen's right side. Keane still stayed motionless. Futile to attempt to overpower Dr. Satan physically. It could not have been done even had the gigantic Bostiff and the agile Gers not been there in that black-walled room. The walls of the trap he had entered were strong walls, and its teeth were sharp teeth, from which there seemed no escape. But Keen's gray eyes were steadfast on the masked face of Dr. Satan, and there was no weakening of resolution in the square line of his jaw. Dr. Satan repeated an order he had given once before on that day. "Oh, Bostiff," he said softly. The iron box. The legless giant hitched his way to the wall, drew back a sable drape, and pulled from the niche in the stonework the coffin-like metal box. Dr. Satan stared at Keane with green glinting eyes. The stare held, minute after minute. Keane's eyes slowly glazed. "You are asleep," droned Dr. Satan at length. "I am asleep," breathed Keane. Gerse and Bostiff stared at each other with savage expectance on their faces. "You will do whatever I command," Dr. Satan said. "I will do whatever you command," said Keane like an automation. Dr. Satan's red-gloved hand went out toward Keane's head. He plucked 3 hairs and laid them over the small mound of yellowish powder on the table. Act for act, he was duplicating the scene in which a treacherous disciple had been reduced from a man to a pinch of ashes. "Take the lid from the box, Bostiff." The legless giant lifted the iron cover from the coffin. Within it could be seen scattered fine ash. "Keane, lie down in the box." The black eyes gleamed with a feral light as Ascott Keane slowly walked to the box and lowered his body into it. Keane lay there, gazing up with wide, glazed eyes. Bostiff placed the lid back on the box. His dull eyes went from the box to the niche in the wall. No, Dr. Satan answered his unspoken question. "We'll not put the box in its crypt. Leave it where it is. I want to watch this." The red-gloved hands clenched with eloquent triumph and revenge. The red-robed figure towered in the room. Then Dr. Satan turned to the metal table. He picked up a bit of the yellowish powder and crumbled it between powerful fingers. The tiny heap on the table burst into clear blue flame. The eyes of Dr. Satan and his 2 servants turned toward the metal box in which lay Keane. Swiftly, the box glowed dull red, cherry red, white-hot. Its rays beat against the faces of the 3, set the sable drapes to billowing a little. And in that white-hot metal coffin, a thing of flesh and blood was lying, or had been lying when the blue flame began to burn. The metal box lost its fierce white glow. The heat rays beating from it faded in intensity. Dr. Satan's red robe stirred with the deep breath he drew. "And so ends Ascott Keane," he said vibrantly. "The one obstacle in my path. I can be a king, an emperor now, in time." He turned to Gerse and Bostiff. "Go! I have no more need of you." Bostiff hitched his huge body silently toward an end wall. He drew aside a drape and opened a door. Gerse followed him out of it. Alone, Dr. Satan went to the cabinet and drew from a drawer the 10 bundles of currency containing $100,000 bills apiece. The bundles disappeared beneath the red robe. His hand went toward the switch that controlled the red illumination of the room, but his finger did not touch the switch. His hand remained suspended in the air while he watched the iron coffin, and his red-robed body was as immobile as that of a statue. The lid of the coffin was moving, slowly, steadily. It raised to slide from the box and clang against the floor. A hand and arm appeared above the edge of the box, which was still black-hot. The hand was unharmed. The coat sleeve above it was charred a little at the cuff. That was all. Another hand and arm appeared, and then the body of Ascott Keane from the waist up as he sat in the coffin. Silently, rigidly, Dr. Satan glared at him. And Keane got out of the coffin and stood beside it. Wisps of smoke rose here and there from singed garments. But his flesh was not even reddened by the fierce fire, and his gray eyes bored steadily at the black eyes behind the mask. "What the Egyptians discovered," he said softly, "they rendered fruitless by succeeding discoveries. I read the origin of your blue flame in your first attempt on my life, Dr. Satan, and I took the precaution of using as armor some of the green paste the old priests used against the consuming fires of their enemies." He took 2 slow steps toward the red-clad figure. "You should have watched your flame instead of the iron coffin, Dr. Satan. You would have seen then that the flame burned blue throughout, and it should have burned red if my body was devoured." The breathing of the red-masked man sounded in the tense hush of the room. His eyes, glaring at the man who had escaped a fate that would have overwhelmed any other mortal on earth, were frightful. "Now we are alone, Dr. Satan. You have considerately sent your men away, as I hoped you would do. We'll see if your powers are as strong as you think they are. The glare faded from Dr. Satan's eyes, leaving them glacially cold. I'll not underestimate you a second time, Ascott Keane. The death shrub, the blue flame. You are armed against those, but I have other weapons.
You'll never use them, Keane growled deep in his throat.
And then his hand shot up. Around Dr. Satan's red-robed body, a softly glowing aura suddenly formed. It was like a ball of pale yellow light which enclosed him, a lambent shell against the red rays of the room's illumination. A snarl came from Dr. Satan's lips, sounding muffled as though the lambent shell had actual substance and could stifle sound. He straightened, with the aura moving as his body moved. His hands moved, weaving strange designs in the yellowed air, and slowly the aura faded a little from around him. Tendons ridged up on the back of Keane's outstretched hand. Perspiration studded his forehead with the intensity of his effort to overwhelm the figure in red. That aura which he had flung around the red-robed body was one of the most powerful weapons known to occultism. A concentration of pure form of electricity known as the life force. Mantling a living thing as it mantled Dr. Satan, it should drain out life, leaving behind nothing but inanimate clay. Yet it was not harming this man. Slowly, relentlessly, the aura continued to fade, and then Dr. Satan's hands rose and leveled toward Keane. Strange duel between two titans, two men who probably knew more of nature's dark secrets than any others on Earth. Odd battle, with Keane, the force of morality, gradually being beaten down by the force of evil. For now, Keane's right arm was sinking as the yellow aura almost disappeared from around Dr. Satan. Slowly, he sank to his knees, as if a great weight oppressed him, and as though this great weight was that of some intangible sea which could suffocate as well as weigh down, he began to gasp for breath. Louder and louder his agonized breathing sounded in the room. Dr. Satan's black eyes glowed with triumph. Keane could see nothing, could feel nothing, yet it was as if some colorless, invisible, tremendously heavy jelly were gradually hardening around him. The red lights grew dimmer, though Dr. Satan had not touched the switch. Keane felt that he was almost lost. With enormous effort, he brought his arms up, spreading them wide at his sides.
Mother of God,
he whispered. Like a living cross he was, in that position, with trunk and head the upright, and his arms like horizontal bars.
Mother of God!
Dr. Satan's snarl was that of a beast. His eyes took on their feral green light, with a fiendish disappointment embittering their depths, and the great invisible sea that was beating Keane down gradually receded from around him. But as it receded, so dimmed the red lights, till the two men were in blackness. This time you preserve your life, Dr. Satan grated in the darkness. Next time, you leave your life behind. There was a thud of a sound, like a soft explosion. Next time, began Keane, struggling to his feet and forcing his body forward through the last traces of the deadly unseen sea. He stopped. He was alone in the black-walled room. Slowly the lights came up again, as though shining ever more clearly through a psychic, thinning fog. Keane began wrenching the black drapes from the walls. He found a door and opened it. Ahead of him he saw a low passage with steps at the end. He ran down the passage, up the steps. In a moment he was in the street, clutching the iron railing he had felt when he came here blinded. Cursing softly, he looked up and down the sidewalk. There was, of course, no sign of the red-clad figure. Defeat, he groaned. Dr. Satan had made good his escape, and with him had gone $1 million, fruit of his first fantastic crime. Defeat! Keane's wide shoulders sagged, but only for a moment. Then they straightened. The first round was Dr. Satan's, but there would be another time, and then, knowing a little more of the manner of being he was pitted against, he could fight more effectively and win. That's the end of tonight's exciting episode. Another startling encounter between Ascott Keane and Dr. Satan will soon be broadcast on this channel. Stay tuned for more. Dr. Satan is copyright 2024 by Edward E. French. All rights reserved. Inquiries should be addressed to email at edwardfrench06@hotmail.com. That's edwardfrench06@hotmail.com. And be sure to subscribe to this channel, the Fiction Fantastique channel. That's www.youtube.com/FrenchEdward06. Good night.